first time ever to okay. Wow, all right. So there's a bunch of folks. Excellent, thank you. I mean, I know everybody else except for you folks, which you're very welcome. So 2 minutes for the new folks. TÜSİAD Silicon Valley Network has been founded by all these volunteers, including myself. We're all volunteers. There's no real employee of TÜSİAD here. They live out in Washington, D.C. They support us remotely. And basically we said, well, we got to find a venue to get the Turkish business people together. So this is our purpose. And what we stand for basically is, number one, build bridges among each other and support each other, hopefully in our professions, social lives, get to know each other, and then also build bridges between Turkey and here, and support the Turkish business community and vice versa. So this year particularly, we've been focused on particular AI webinars that we just held one yesterday, which was focused on biotechnology. We're really excited about it. It's the first event we ever had something like that. And then we had an event on law and AI. And then we had another event to do with AI and enterprise. And today is the second one of that series, except we're holding it face to face. So I'm hoping that after this event, you guys stay around and we'll have an opportunity to network and get to know each other. I'd love to meet everybody who are the first-time comers. But just as an FYI, I think today we're 500 people strong. There's thousands of Turks in the Bay Area, as you know. And we're just trying to keep it a little bit constricted and, just to ourselves. We're trying to make sure that it's largely decision makers, academicians, people who are business managers, or startup owners, and people who are close to the VC community is our focus. So, having said that, I'd love to get going on today's event. It's such a privilege to welcome such outstanding panel today, and the best thing is they're some of my favorite people in the world, so I love it. It's so much fun to introduce somebody's friends, which we've been working with most of them since the inception of this, which is very exciting. And then Özlem is out here all the way from Portland, which is fantastic. So, and we're not going to make Timur speak Turkish. Although we can pressure you to answer some of them in Turkish. He has exceptional Turkish, but he shies away from speaking. So with that, I do welcome all of you. You're welcome to volunteer. As I said, we're all volunteers. We got different variety of committees, and the last very exciting program we kicked off is to do with mentorship for university students in Stanford and Berkeley universities. So it's a very small select group of students we're engaged with, and we're trying to help them. So if any of you do want to sign up as mentors, you're very welcome. And as I said, we do welcome anybody who wants to give back to Turkey or support each other in Bay Area. With that, welcome. And today, I'm going to give the word to our boss for the day, İpek Tunca.
I think it's safer to do that. Mic? No mic? No mic? I think the panel prefers no mic.
Okay.
All right, so
Sure.
we'll try this, and if it's not working, we'll switch. I actually will invite all of my panelists to join me on stage. Hi everyone, I'm İpek Tunca. I look after developer, we'll have you here. I look after developer marketing at Meta, and I'm excited to host these amazing panelists to have a discussion on AI in business, which is a very wide topic, but I think we have quite the breadth of experience and perspectives on our panel. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and share what their favorite AI application is. Sena, why don't we start with you?
That was a difficult question. Hi everyone, my name is Sena. I'm a founder turned venture capitalist. I built 2 startups. One of them was very small, never took money, and financially it was very successful. The other one took money, but it was unsuccessful. So I've seen both sides of that table, and then one of my investors asked me to come join him in the new fund that he was building. So I've been investing with him ever since, kind of like a startup. We got to build the fund together, and I've been with him for 5 years. I also help a couple of corporates on their investment committees to make startup investment decisions. I like B2B technology and infrastructure, data infrastructure, and I only do early stage. If you have more than $1 million in revenue, it's too late for me. My favorite AI tool these days is called Crew AI. I'm currently working on building a little assistant for myself on it. It's a agent-based model. It's open source, and it's pretty amazing.
Thank you. Özlem, all the way from Portland.
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Özlem Kode. First of all, huge thanks for having me here, IPEC and Island for hosting, and for Ayşegül for the inspiration and leadership in starting the network. So it's a privilege to be here. I represent, I guess, the corporate part of the AI world. I work at Intel as the general manager for channel, ecosystem, and graphics. And I've been with the company for 25 years. If you want to know, I started in, the joke is I started in kindergarten. So, you know, I moved around, never had a moment to be bored. In fact, I started when I was still a student working with Ayşegül as an intern back in Turkey, back in '99. And then I found my way from the local office to Germany to our regional offices for Europe, and I lived there in Germany for about 10 years. And I've been in the US for now more than 10 years in global roles working for Intel. As all of you here have a keen interest in AI and doing a lot of work at the moment in AI. And I think today will be a good conversation between your perspective and ours. So yeah, I look forward to it. Thanks for having me.
Do you have a favorite AI app?
Favorite AI app? Favorite is a hard one, but yesterday we were playing with Comfy UI and turned all of ourselves to cyberpunk. So I think we're gonna use that theme next week in our field conference. So yeah, it's just a lot of fun to just try different things.
Thank you. Timur?
Great to see everybody. I'm Timur Jujalu Yarnal, and from a background standpoint, I'm a 4-time co-founder. Nothing massive, but I've had a couple of good exits. Probably the best one was a fraud detection startup that did bot detection and advertising. So as I like to joke, before Elon Musk was talking about bots on Twitter, we were about 10 years before we were detecting bots. And then I launched my last startup the day before the pandemic shutdown hit San Francisco. We did a seed round and did a conference launch, and then the shutdown came. So that was the worst experience of that, but even if you're not successful, the journey is the victory, right? So we're all successful in that. That startup is still going on, but I don't know that we're gonna make it, we'll see. And that turned into a big break. I actually was an advisor to a company called Neeva, which was a private search engine built on LLMs, and when Neeva was finally ready to look at enterprise, I jumped in, left my startup, and I ran enterprise BD for Neeva until we got acquired by Snowflake, and then so Sridhar is now the CEO of Snowflake, and I worked with him. And then I worked at a hot startup called Glean, which has just raised a big round from Kleiner and Sequoia, very much focused on enterprise search and using different LLMs. And then AWS came knocking, and I couldn't resist this role now where I run the AI ML BD team for the AWS Startups organization. So I get to try and work with the hottest AI startups. Microsoft and GCP wouldn't agree with us that we're with the hardest, but that's our fun competitors. So I'm having a blast, and I really love, to me, the Bay Area feels more alive, and I think this reminds me of the .com boom, but like in a more nuanced way. I think folks know that we're in a hype cycle, but it's a real hype cycle, and so I'm just having a blast in terms of the energy at these events, and it's great to be at TÜSİAD. And then of course, many of you know, so many friends here, but my background, and one of the reasons I love TÜSİAD and the Turkish audience is I get to mention my father, Doğan Cüceloğlu. So I get to brag about him because I'm his son, and I think many of you have probably read his books like Var mısın? And it really influences my view on AI and technology and the whole purpose of business. So give me an excuse to brag about him, and I will.
All right. And your favorite AI app?
There's so many. I think I have a background in some systems and mechanical engineering, and so I think the impact on robotics is just so amazing. So Hume has been in the news quite a bit, doing some work with Hume, which is a emotional recognition app. And as I was looking at it, it was like, you know, emotional and you know, as my father would always say, only 10% of communication is words, right? 10% of communication is words, 40 to 50% is the tone of your voice, and then the other 50% is your body language. And so their point is that you're only getting 10% by training on text, and so the rest, the emotional analysis and the impact then on having a robot that can actually potentially read is an amazing vision.
I'll have to check that out, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hume.
Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing all of that. All right, so let's get started. Obviously, it's AI in business is like such a broad topic. So I'm gonna try to ask, you know, different components, and then we'll definitely have opportunity for the audience to ask you questions as well. But Timur, why don't we start with you? Where are you seeing AI being successfully used in business, since you have perspective all the way from startups to enterprise?
Yeah, I think so far we're seeing, obviously I think the quote was maybe 70 billion in tier one venture capital investment coming in, and so far only about 4 to 5 billion in revenue production for startups. So we know that we're in an early stage, and there's not the ROI from a revenue standpoint. I think we all have to admit that. Generally, I'd say we're seeing, opportunity, yes.
Sounds like we're losing the patient.
Generally, I'd say we're seeing still mostly horizontal use cases. So there hasn't been a ton of verticalized, so I'd say we are seeing some vertical specific, but Glean, for example, is a horizontal application primarily used by engineering teams to search across Slack, Jira, team tickets, you know, to centralize that, and it's a wonderful tool. And then also for customer support, like very broadly, like customer support being used. We generally would describe it as probably only, you know, 10 to 15% of enterprises are really training their own models right now and really experienced with their own LLMs, and probably another 15 to 20 to maybe 30% are multi-model, you know, fully testing. Really everyone else is at the experimentation phase, and I think we're gonna see the verticalization around key apps really emerge in the next, I'm gonna say 9 to 12 months. I think other folks think it's gonna happen a lot faster, but I would say probably like 9 to 12 months. That's what we're saying.
Özlem, what are you seeing on the enterprise side, and what has changed? What do you think is gonna change?
Yeah, I mean, it's an inflection point, or maybe an explosion point, you could say, in AI. Go back 18 months. I think if you were in AI, you were not surprised by GPT-4, but if you're not working in AI, I think the rest of the world kind of got caught by surprise. And now fast forward 18 months, right? There's hundreds of models, pre-trained models. So I work at Intel. We've already shipped 5 million AI PCs. We're gonna ship 40 million by end of this year, 100 million by end of next year. These are already optimized for those 500 large language models. So the speed of development in this space is just blows my mind, right? What I think is now the conversation is moving from training, where, you know, some companies, they had to make huge investments from an infrastructure standpoint, spent years training these models, but not every enterprise has to do this, right? I think a lot of enterprises are now looking at those models and how they can take that to their work environment and implement it for their use cases. So with technologies like RAG, they can actually take their own private data and use that to generate accurate responses in a fast way, in a low-cost way. So I think that's where now the conversation is moving to. Again, an example from Intel, we make our own products. You might know we have factories here in California, in Oregon, all around the world. And we use this in our own factories too. You know, in a company like Intel, we make hundreds of millions of products every year. And if there's a problem in the factory, that's a huge problem, right? If you pull people off their work, and, you know, if they have to go spend days analyzing a failure or a yield issue, I mean, that's hundreds of millions of dollars of impact, right? So we don't have to do that anymore. Using RAG, we can keep our data private. We can keep it local.
RAG is.
You can explain that probably
Well,
better
I'm sorry,
than
I'm
me.
saying
Right,
for
so-
the folks, because I love Silicon Valley, people are so up to speed,
Right.
but I wonder like how commonly known is RAG?
Yeah, I mean, iterative augmented generation, or retrieval augmented generation, right? So you take the model that's already trained and you use your local data And with your local data, you can keep it local, but generate more accurate responses, right? I mean, the large language models, they don't know everything about you. But with this technology, you can use your own data. So like the case of Intel, and we can use our own private data on manufacturing, on yields and so on. And now we can generate a guidance for that technician and say, hey, most likely your issue is this, and you can try these 3 things. I mean, you might have saved days and millions of dollars, and this is just an example from our own factory floor. We never have to feed our private data into a public model. So again, to kind of keep it short, I think it's moving quickly from that huge billions of dollars of investment, years of training, into more local, more private, more cost-effective implementation for companies of all sizes. That's kind of where I think things are going.
What are the scenarios that you're seeing as kind of like the first line of adoption?
Manufacturing was one example from Intel factory line. I've seen examples in retail, right? If you're KFC, for example, you can use a kiosk that can communicate with you in a human way. I've seen examples from companies like Ulta Beauty, again, another retail example. They have an AI engine running in the background. It can help you find the right tone of foundation for your skin or your lipstick, right? So you don't have to spend time on the floor or so those are just a few examples, but I think they go from, financial services to healthcare, to retail, to manufacturing, to education. I think all those verticals, to your point, will quickly start adopting these technologies. So it's a really mind-blowing time, I think.
And I would add, I think when I was talking about the road, I was so biased towards, I was talking about generative AI more, and I think your point is great. Like, you've been in AI for so long that it's all so fundamentally into those areas, and I think that's a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so now what's happening on the startup side? Obviously, tons of different types of approaches, but what are some of the cool innovations happening?
I think, so we've been investing in AI since 2018, and obviously in the past year, we're seeing, the change into the end applications, developing very fastly, and also infrastructure getting funded a lot, which used to be, the big boys game before. But I think before, AI in enterprise used to be more along the lines of, acceleration, improvement of existing applications. So it used to be there, but it didn't used to be something that you could touch and experience with. So it was there. In the past year, I would say a couple of the things that we're seeing and we're very interested in is one, what we call vertical SaaS. So AI helping lawyers, AI helping accountants, AI helping HVAC employees. Like we were recently looking at a solution where, let's say a CRM is by your name, for instance, a marketing solution. They're building a CRM where a house is the customer instead of the person that owns the house. And the AI gathers all the information about the history of the house from the utilities and everything. So when the HVAC technician is going into the house, it comes with the story of the house already built in. So they're not looking around. Like things like that, where it's extremely verticalized, and we're seeing people from those industries coming in and matching with technology builders and using these ready models. Or even I'm seeing a lot of companies where they don't know coding, they don't know anything, they just know their industry, and some of these models are so accessible these days that they can just start building. So that's something that we're seeing that we're very excited about. Another thing that we're seeing is infusion of existing apps and existing processes that's powered in an incredible way with AI, that they sort of start doing the tasks completely by themselves. So replacement of the worker, not necessarily the worker, but that task is fully outsourced to AI. That we really haven't seen before in the past years, but with the adoption of these agent-based models, we're seeing the complete decision-making process and AI taking over a task completely. So we're seeing more development over there. That's really exciting. And I would say on the adoption side also, like I work with a small fund. We don't have the power to invest into a lot of these like large infrastructure models, but I'm seeing a lot of smaller companies pop up on where we call the middleware. On the application level, obviously we have millions of applications, but on the middleware side of it, developing local LLMs, vertical industry specific LLMs, a lot of vertical maintenance operation solutions, things like that. We're seeing a lot of interesting middleware or support applications coming in as well.
Cool. That actually goes right into the next question, which is how can startups differentiate themselves in spaces where they're competing against bigger enterprise, deeper pocket AI players? And I would love to hear your perspective after Sena as well.
I think the biggest power they have is speed to market. I think generally, especially if you're selling to enterprise can be lazy. Once they adopt a solution and people start using it, it's very difficult for them to switch to a different solution. So if you can be the first and go in, and that sometimes requires integrations with things that they're already using. So if you can get to that speed, and sometimes you can buy speed with money, sometimes you can't, money doesn't buy it for you because the technology isn't there yet. But if you can buy that speed right now, it's a great time to just get to market immediately.
What do you think?
I mean, the speed to market is a huge one. I think until you've worked in a large company, we have this mistaken view that it's easier to launch something because you have the resources, but you have to get so much consensus at minimum to do that. So I agree with that. I think they can differentiate. I mean, the revenue story is going to come fast, right? I think differentiating through revenue and uptake. But I would also call out that there's so much fear around LLMs in the enterprise in terms of security concerns, which are well-founded. And for example, AWS is basing one of our entire products, Bedrock, is really it's a security platform, essentially. It's the whole point is like you can run your enterprise data, but the foundation models run securely within it so that the model companies don't see any of the data. Like the whole pitch is protect your data. Enterprises the startups can be a little faster. They can make some mistakes without it being a death warrant, right? There are issues that you can have a smaller breach in certain cases, and so that ability to take some risk, I think, is a point. And fundamentally, I also think we're here in Silicon Valley. We have to acknowledge that one of our big advantages, maybe everywhere on the West Coast, but more than any other place I've ever seen, is that failure is not a death knell here. Failure is a badge of honor. And I think we take that for granted. After a little while, I certainly did. I was, coming up through university, and it was kind of drilled into my head at Stanford that it's okay. And then I moved to other regions. I was like, oh, that's not the case there. If you fail as an entrepreneur in other regions, nobody's going to ever work with you again. We don't have that here. So that's still a fundamental advantage that startups have too.
So speaking of risks and challenges, what do you think some of the ways to think about them, to help mitigate them, to reduce the fear around them?
Yeah, I think you hit a few of them, Timur, right? For enterprises, they care deeply about security. Yeah. They care deeply about privacy. And I think you see kind of different extremes. Take, for example, entertainment industry. If you're a gamer, I'm sure you know Steam, who publish a lot of the games. And Steam took a very strong position and said, if as a game developer, if you wrote your game code using AI, Gen AI, then you can't stream that game on Steam because the IP gets really murky. If the code is generated by AI, who owns the code? So they took a strong stance, which kind of held that industry back a little bit, right? So the users are really excited about AI. If you're a gamer, you know that you want to see more from those dumb characters, the non-playables, if you watch the Ryan Reynolds movie Free Guy. So the users want to see more going on, but the industry's kind of like stalled a little bit. I think it's similar in the entertainment industry. If you look at content creators, there's a lot of fear among the creators when it comes to movies and other creative work. The consensus, I think, is it takes one kind of brave soul, maybe a big name to be the first one, and then the rest will follow. Yeah. So that's, I think, what folks think. And if I were to give an example, from what we're doing in the enterprise to kind of mitigate concerns
Yeah.
like these security risks. I think it really again comes back to technologies like the reiterative augmented retrieval augmented generation like RAG, which allows companies to keep their private data private, and you don't need to feed it into the cloud. So that empowers them to be able to use that locally in a low cost way, in a low latency way. And I think that really opens up the possibilities. I think banning AI, thinking, oh, this is gonna cause security risk, it's kind of really short-sighted. Data shows that in 2 years, 50% of all edge workloads will be AI workloads. So the speed of development is massive, and being afraid and holding back, I think is it's a high risk strategy given how fast things are gonna move. So I think it's better to do some low risk, limited impact trials. Maybe open up the door to some users to use applications that are local, that are low risk, and start trying. And to Timur's point, fail fast, right? And learn from it, because I started working on AI, believe it or not, just in October, but I feel like I spent years, working in it. So, and I'm still trying to get my first deployments to market, right? We've got the hardware, we've got the software, we've got customers, but there's some translation layer missing. We need startups to help bridge those companies. I was with a customer from Germany this week. They make servers and PCs and they sell them to hospitals. I know, Bernard, you're in healthcare, right? And they've been doing this for years, right? They're a hardware company, they have a software partner. Their software partner has a great application for healthcare. Their code base is from the 90s, right? They haven't done any work in AI. So I need to bring in companies like, you guys to be able to translate the data they have into something that those folks on the ground can use. 60% of the data enterprises have today is unused, completely unused. 90% of our data in enterprise, completely unstructured. So at the point in which you can structure this data, start using this data, the insights you can generate and the upside you can generate, the potential is just massive. So my hope is that companies will kind of find opportunities to use low risk, limited impact trials in a local and private way. That way find a way forward for them.
But I think to add to your message, I think I'm seeing startups that started, coding in 2022 that are having this difficulty.
Yeah.
It's not. I think we're starting to see these AI first architectures in software development, whereby if you've started in a different way, it's so difficult to pivot from that. And either you have to really start from scratch and change your business model, or like we're seeing a lot of companies that are still called startups but have been around for, let's say, more than 1 year. We're seeing them do exactly as you say. Either they take on one of their features and then they put AI into it and they say, now we're AI enabled, or like we right now like rebrand as AI company, but it's like one feature getting like cuter, or like there's a chat feature on it. But because it's so difficult, and also some of these models really require very lean architecture, or they require so much data to be processed that it has to be financially viable for you to build these apps. So like there's a lot of components as well where I think any existing software needs to go through that sort of cleanup, and we're going to see a lot of change and pivots in models.
I just want to do a quick plug for the webcast that we did that TÜSİAD did on all the risks associated with AI. It's excellent if you haven't had an opportunity to view it. It's online, it's on our YouTube channel. Back to our program.
You can do this for a living, in fact.
You can.
You are a natural. I love it.
So we talked a lot about different opportunities, different layers, etc. Let's talk about collaborations and partnerships and the role it should, has the potential to play when you're offering AI solutions, whoever wants to take it. And then I would love to get maybe 2 perspectives.
You're saying partnerships?
Partnerships, yeah, like for example, how can enterprise companies can partner with startups, etc. You know, obviously there's so much that is being offered. I don't know whether anybody's claiming that they're offering it all yet.
Okay, so I mean, obviously Azure OpenAI are like the partnership that everybody thinks of most on that, and hopefully that's collaborative. I mean, I think well, when you start talking about AGI, you know, the general intelligence, I mean, I respect Sam Altman. I mean, he's never heard of me, but he, you know, he definitely makes some statements about essentially conquering the world with AGI, and you know, all big corporations have a desire to please their shareholders, but I think it's a really important point that it needs to be a partnership. I think enterprises are, I think, number 1 or number 2 on every CIO's list right now. You know, the number 1 or 2 thing that every CIO is hearing from their board is, what are we going to do in generative AI, right? So I think using that is a point of funding the startups, and then the partnerships in terms of ensuring a responsibility mechanism, I think are critical. So I mean, I'll kind of go down the responsible AI path between the ISO standards, and Island and I, you know, spoke on a panel in New York about that, which was very compelling for me to hear that. So I think that's one of the biggest parts of the partnership, is just ensuring that the mechanisms are responsible, and then there's an ISO definition of that, and then there's kind of a human intention of that. And I keep plugging from my side, and I feel good to be in somewhat of a position to influence this. You know, I want to support the startups and the enterprises that are looking to augment human capability and not just flat out replace humans or human capability. That being said, I think probably 70% of the startups on the platforms, maybe more, are just, their pitch is, hey, we're just going to replace all your human costs. So I don't know where that leads. I think the partnerships have to be, where does this lead, and we have a responsibility to apply this technology in a way that works for society. And so when I think of partnerships, I think of that, and I think there's a whole group of folks. I mean, every organization I know, I'm sure you're talking about that all the time.
Yeah.
And that gives me hope. But the partnerships, I think the you know, the data training, the data used for training, and the common crawl partnerships. We're talking more and more about open source models. You know, so I think the open source component of generative AI is incredibly hopeful, right? I mean, you can run these on your phone. Meta, to credit, just released Llama 3, which is maybe the most powerful model out there, and it's free.
Yeah, it's one of the most popular.
It's just amazing, and my team is doing a ton of work with it. So that's what comes to mind when I think about partnerships.
Yeah,
I
can kind of pile on. I think right now AI is like the Wild West, right? Nobody really knows what to do. I think everybody's trying all kinds of things. And as Intel, we work with some of our traditional partners like Microsoft on Copilot, or Adobe, or VMware, but we're also working with startups. So not every corporation is going to be able to afford $350 annual license to use Copilot, right? If you're a small business, you may not have the funds to afford that service, but you still want the capability. So I'm here for this meeting, but I'm also meeting a startup tomorrow that has a solution for an assistant and, you know, RAG-based application. That's not going to cost $350, right? So I think even for big companies like Intel, we'll have partnerships with some big companies, but there's also some smaller companies and startups that maybe traditionally we never worked with before. So that, I think that's exciting. And especially for those verticalized use cases you're talking about, I think we're going to need those nimble players that can quickly bring applications without a huge infrastructure investment, especially to companies that are kind of those medium-sized and small-sized companies and users.
I think in terms of what I'm seeing, and honestly what I've experienced as a founder as well, I was on the more data infrastructure side, but I sold B2B2B, so I experienced that partnership a lot. It has to be mutually beneficial. Otherwise, for a lot of startups, it's sort of like a badge of honor to partner with Intel. I partnered with Intel. You put it on your website. And like, I see a lot of these startups that are coming to us. We're NVIDIA partner. Like, like what does it mean? Have they done anything for you? You know? So they're nice logos for those that are not in the business. The moment you're in, you know that it means nothing. So you get into these ecosystems, and a lot of the time, I think it's very difficult for a large company's sales structures to absorb you as a startup and to resell you, especially on the early stage, because you sell multi-million-dollar contracts. That startup has never sold a, let's say, $100K contract. They don't know how to service that contract. They don't even know if their solution scales for you to comfortably sell that contract. So what I see most of the time in early stage technology is there's that promise, and there's, you know, a lot of shiny POCs where it turns into a nice use case for the websites. But when you look at it from an investor perspective, what we want to see is scalable revenue. And most of the time, we see these corporate partnerships as a slowdown on the startup's balance sheet. And so it can be really detrimental. And I think also for a founder that hasn't really experienced this, and I was one of them, I was very proud of the revenue we earned with a lot of the corporates. Like we had a very nice balance sheet, but then I went to the investors and they were like, that's not real revenue. That's not repeatable revenue. And so, and I had so many logos, and I think that's what's happening right now. And it's mutually beneficial in terms of PR. And I think it's nice to have a lot of these case studies and all these things, but a lot of these startups, especially in AI, I think they're going to be very short-lived. Things are changing so rapidly that I don't think they necessarily have that timing to pull these partnerships together.
I think I'm going to run my POC through you before I take it to the market.
I've been burned.
She knows
I've
what
been,
it's all
like
about.
even the contract, like 20-page contract, like I don't have time to read, but you know, like
I know.
I
AI
think
will read it for you.
yes, and one of my best friends has become my sales partner from SAP. We were SAP partner in my previous startup. And the best advice she ever gave me, she said, if you're not getting me $1 million in revenue per customer, I'm not learning your solution. And I never forget, they don't care. And that's something I never forget.
Right, let's continue with you, Sena.
Yeah.
So many AI startups. Which ones do you think, or how do we know which ones to invest in? How to assess them? Where should venture dollars go?
I think, honestly speaking, I mean, this may be a little bit controversial opinion, but like when we look at the standard fund cycle of venture capital, we look at 7 to 10 years of return. That's been the average. AI is changing that, whereby companies are getting adopted extremely fast. Like we've never seen this type of, you know, viral adoption, but then dying down very fast. So I keep wondering, I think alternative models of investments will come to market to support some of these companies, whereby it's not necessarily a 10-year long-term investment, but some investors would be okay with, you know, a smaller round. Let's do a 100K, 10K each friend, you know, Silicon Valley, we're gonna push this solution into the market. We're gonna see if it makes a couple of $1 million. Maybe we can flip it together, and then we'll take the cash back and we're done.
And you'd agree, I mean, we're seeing angels play a much more prominent role right away now.
Right away.
Yeah, because
And,
it's not the
and it's just,
traditional,
it doesn't fit into the venture capital returns math. I think another thing we're gonna see, and we've started to see these venture studios pop up, where you have these, you know, ex-founders, people with money. Sometimes we see them raising money from outside investors as well. We don't know what's gonna win, so we're gonna hedge our bets. We're gonna raise $1 million, and we're gonna hedge our bets into 10 different ideas. Very much like the gaming model, or like even the Hollywood studio model, where you bet on the company, you bet on the founders, not necessarily the idea. And so I think there's going to be some alternative funding in these like venture studio type of models. I think in terms of venture capital, obviously the infrastructure and middleware is still getting funding. Also, startups, are getting funding based on their go-to-market and sales strategies as opposed to the product, because like most of the time we see the exact same solution but 15 pitches of it, and it's like most of the time founders are fighting with me on like, my feature is better, mine is faster, like nobody cares, can you sell this? And so the difference ends up becoming who can sell it.
That GTM as your differentiation. All right, my last question before I open it up to our audience. How do we keep up with everything that's happening? And like, if you have any advice, because we obviously have audience members who are working at startups, from academia, as well as enterprise companies. If you can do a quick round.
I mean, I think it's setting the level at which you want to keep up. I mean, I need to take a broader ecosystem approach, so I have a few selected data sources that I go to most every day, and then I've got a few that I check in on, and then I rely on my trusted network to offer to me. So I think that the podcast that you love that I refer you to, I think A16Z does generally do a great podcast. You got points there that you can get to. I think that we're in a little bit of a breathless cycle, so all of us in this room are already gonna keep up just because we're in this room and it's gonna happen anyway. But the prioritization, and then digging deep where you feel that you want to be a thought leader, that's a key thing, and then I think let the other points kind of wash ahead of you. So that's probably a simple way of saying it, but we're all passionate about it. We're gonna keep up.
Yeah, I'll kind of build on what you said, the breathless cycle. That's a good way to define it. Maybe a question to the audience. What % of AI projects do you think succeed? Any guesses? 15. Yeah, so according to Gartner, 85% of the projects fail. So we can't keep up, right? So, forget that. So what works for me is, as I said, I started working on this in October, right? Now I'm honored to have the opportunity to be a part of a panel. I rely on my network. I notice that the things that really matter bubble up through my LinkedIn network. Things that my peers are reading, my competitors are reading, bubble up. So I follow LinkedIn religiously because it's been a great resource, news resource for me. And I spend time just reading and learning every day. And that's just what I've been doing. Going to events and things like that too, but it's primarily reading.
Personally, for me, I learned by doing, so I use a lot of tools, and then it got me back to like the phone book Rolodex type of like what tool I used, because I keep forgetting, and then they just spam you. But I think trying a lot of things, seeing where they are, and I think having that open mind of like, I see a lot of people using a tool and then dismissing it. Oh, like it doesn't work perfectly. Oh, like it won't replace me. It won't, like, where we've come in the past year, it should be, if it's any reflection of where things are going, like, don't be dismissive of where solutions are today. Things are improving so rapidly. And so to have that open eye, that attitude, I think like maybe as Turks we have that like dismissive attitude sometimes, like to be able to reverse that attitude, to be very open-minded, to try new things when they come out. I think that's gonna be like, to read everything, to absorb everything, but like to be open and to change. I think very critical.
I mean, my personal experience is that once you start using it, it actually starts opening your mind in different ways.
Yes, because
it's
you
less
don't think
about
that
the
way.
actual
Yes.
use case scenario,
Yes.
but it's about changing your perspective over time.
I think a 2-week outlook is good. Like I'm finding, like in my current role, one of the biggest value adds I give our team is that about every couple of weeks I'll just send out a sample of, here are the things that really stood out to me over the last couple of weeks. And I'm finding people coming to me saying, thank you so much. Like I'm just feeling overwhelmed otherwise. And so just taking that kind of a couple-week perspective with the models. And then I did want to call out I think, the truth, but like a big insult you can give an AI company is like, you're just a wrapper, right? Like it's just a company that all they're doing is sending information to the model. And we know that that's not sustainable. We also know what's not sustainable is just everything depending on so much on compute. So
Yes.
when a startup comes to me and says, I just need access to more compute, I'm like, no, you actually need to rethink your product roadmap, because if all you're doing is just hammering, NVIDIA boxes, and you think that's gonna be the win, in very rare circumstances, that's the right move. But in general, the most successful startups I'm seeing don't actually even have to rely on the big compute options. They can use
Right.
Intel chips, or they can use others, and they're doing inference in a really smart way. So I think winding down to where the biggest of the hype cycles, and then actually looking to, where I'd say to keep up is look at, I really agree with those who say, like Ali Ghodsi, who's the CEO of Databricks, first said this, and it's become a real trend, like we need to take a systems approach to this. It's not just pounding on the model. I think looking at inference and how you do these together, and folks who do inference not just relying on these big chips have to take a systems approach using a vector database smartly. That's how we're gonna keep ahead, because that's really where this is gonna go very, very rapidly.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective, and
Absolutely.
would love to get some questions from the audience.
Hi. Hi guys, I'm Boris Cardone. Thank you very much for the panel, by the way. Not long ago I was a VC too, so I was answering similar questions. And back then we used to back technical founders, and there was a sales and marketing risk, there's a market risk. Here I look at it, on top of the sales and market risk, there's a badass product risk, whether it's gonna work or not, if you do your own model. So maybe that can be solved with capital, and Timur, you mentioned better mathematics behind it, but my question to you is this: with all these risks out there, what's the right capitalization for a startup? How capital intensive really is an AI startup to do it right with their own models, not a Raptor type company? I mean, is it 10 million, 20 million of Series A actually that we don't realize it yet? Or is it something else?
You wanna take the first crack, or I mean, my opinion on that, moving fast, we just announced a great case study today where we took a startup that was spending a ton on OpenAI, and we were able to help them get on an open source model, 90% cost reduction for better performance, for example, which, by the way, is important both from a cost standpoint, and I think as a VC, you love hearing that, like you want your capital efficiency. It's also really important from an environmental standpoint too. I do want to throw a flag out there that from an environmental standpoint, we can't just keep burning these chips the way that we are. But what we know is not sustainable. I think the statistic still is like 70% of every VC dollar is going to either NVIDIA or OpenAI. And that just can't happen. That's like Meta, 12 years ago or something, where every VC dollar was going to Facebook marketing. So I would say that when you see the working model that's not just relying on compute, probably that $10 to $20 million Series A is going to go to a smart GTM plan. Yeah. And so that's where I would push if I was the investor.
I think also some of it is, if you're a very early stage investor, in this hype, you make your money from the next investor that invests in your company, in your portfolio, rather than the company exiting.
Yeah.
So I think in that sense, I'm seeing a lot of VCs throw in money, very early money, to just, smart people, hoping that, they can go into some sort of YC program, or they get some sort of, more VC money, and then they 5x their money in a year anyways. And so in the very, very early stages, I'm seeing a lot of that. I think 2 years ago, we were in a stage where raising a lot of money made sense quietly, because you had the time and the market opportunity to build in stealth. These days, you don't really have that. So I feel like right now, the amounts are either astronomically large, where you're really changing something. I'm gonna use less compute. I'm gonna write a new model. Like, it has to be very, very drastically different. Or if you need to get to market, let's say in 6 months or less time, then you raise less, then you get to market, and then you raise 100 million. So you want that progression.
Yeah, and building on your idea, so Intel worked with Boston Consulting Group, and we took 50 years worth of their data and helped them build their own Gen AI model, just using general purpose servers, general purpose Intel Xeon processors, and then pretty cost effective and power effective AI accelerator. And now they, instead of, for every new project, consultants have to spend, I don't know if they're consultants here, but tons of time going through the past data and so on. Now you can do that actually pretty quickly through their Gen AI model, and they didn't have to build a server farm or spend millions on infrastructure. So I think, to your point, it really depends on what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's the key factor.
So I have a question to Timur. There's a rumor that OpenAI is going to announce its search engine on Monday, the day before.
I thought it was today. Today was the rumor. It was supposed to be
The
today.
day before Google I/O. As someone who worked in 2 search startups founded by tons of ex-Googlers. And I think Glenn just hired Tamar, the ex-CPO of Slack, who was a VP at Google. So what do you think? Do you think are they going to be able to succeed?
Well, I think one of the things that's the most fun is that there is, I wouldn't say it's a jump ball in search, but for the first time, like, dominance in search is a little bit in question. So I'm speaking personally, I'm not speaking as a representative of AWS in this case, I want to be clear. So it's a fun time. I do think there's the opportunity. I mean, reimagining search, I will say that my experience at Neva, like best search experience I ever had was using Neva. Like everything from the UI to knowing that my data wasn't being exfiltrated without my permission or knowledge. And there was real growth. It was hard to go for the subscription model. So yeah, I do think something can happen. I mean, ChatGPT is the fastest to 100 million users in history, right? So with that, we'd be discounting, which I think is exactly why, TK, the CEO of GCP, basically lives on an airplane and meets with every AI co-founder possible because, if Google loses 2 to 3 points on the search dominance, like that monopoly is over. Whereas, they need those AI companies building on there. Again, I'm speaking as Timur, the person, not competitive model, if I can disclose that. So I think it's a really interesting time, and it's one of the reasons why we're having fun again. I mean, there's so much energy in the area because for the first time in 20 years, like foundationally, like search is in competition. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why Sridhar is so energized at Snowflake and why Glean's a 6-year-old startup in the least sexy place. Enterprise search, nobody cared. And then they launched this enterprise search assistant layer last April. They went from 5 million in ARR, they finished last year at 35 million in ARR, and they're gonna be at 115 million in ARR by this year. So yeah, it's like incredible growth, and it's a fun area to watch. Yeah, and I did think the rumor was it was gonna launch today, and then
I think now they are gonna do that day before Google I/O.
Yeah.
But what Neva didn't do a great exit, right? Like the acquisition money was less than or around what they raised.
Yeah, it wasn't a great exit.
So, and then I
Started too early.
I worked in Google Search 5 years. Some of my friends were the first engineers. I think they had amazing talent, yet they failed to get any reasonable market share. And also there are like countries like Russia, Korea, where Google Search is not number 1 in Japan.
Yeah.
So like, do you really think 2-3% would be? I think Bing got much more than 2-3% in early 2010, 11, 12. Right?
I think that the 2 to 3% would radically change Google's pricing power to where Google can now charge a premium multiple that even if you have a wedge of 2 to 4%, there's more options to go. And then Neva did get, but again, where Neva failed was not in like product feedback. It was they were trying to charge a $10 a month subscription, thinking that private search could be like a VPN. That was really where it fell apart. I think Neva also just launched 2 years before anybody really cared about being built on LLMs, and having been done on enterprise, there was a massive enterprise business to be built there. It's just, when you raise that early and you hire top Google engineers, and that top Google engineer's wife is saying, look, you've been out of Google for 3 years. Look what happened to Google's market cap. You left $20 million on the table. I need an exit now. That really influences what you have to do, right? So those dynamics are launching, but the opportunities are just incredible. So, and I'm a big fan of Databricks, but I'm also not betting against what's happening at Snowflake because that technology is at Snowflake, and I think they're going to have the best RAG solution possible because they've got the Neva tools in there. That's my bet. But it's a fun debate. I'm happy to keep going on that. It's a good question. An insider question.
I have one, but like Google doesn't make much money from informational trades. Like search engines usually.
You don't want to
so
want.
like, do you think will they will is it really where new or other search engines make money?
So you're saying Google doesn't make much money from?
From informational queries where you seek information. I think they make money from shopping, video seeking, local result seeking.
Yeah,
right?
let's
Like
continue
that's-
this one-on-one. I don't know if the ads business
Follow-up needed.
shows how much money they make on that, and then that's been used, to YouTube and others. But it's good. I mean, by the way, Google's an amazing business. My co-founder for my first company, there was 4 of us. My co-founder for my first company had a written job offer to be employee number 25 at Google. We went to lunch with Larry and Sergey, just with Larry, and he had that. And at the time, nobody thought Google was going to beat Yahoo and others, and so he turned down the offer to stay with us. So I mean, Google's amazing. So we all have stories like that in Silicon Valley. I'll say that. But anyway, I'm a big Google fan. I know there was memes about Neva circulating at Google, so it's fun.
All right, we'll take one last question.
So we are talking about generative AI, and then it's a creative process involved. And then, of course, to have this creative process, the models are trained on billions of data. And then these data includes also copyrighted intellectual property data. So what do you think about the morality here? Sam Altman says that we can't do this by paying to the people that we are using. But he's also making good points that we need these technological developments. So I feel conflicted inside myself. So I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on this? How do you, creative people are probably one of the things that comes to my mind. Their jobs will be affected. You can even create video right now. You can create movie, write a book, write a journalistic news. So these jobs are on the line, and then they are doing it on top of the existing work.
My personal opinion is that we need to somehow have a decentralized model of data monetization. There's obviously data on the corporate side, on the content side, on all these things, but there's also a lot of personal data that people can broker, or the things that they have produced that they can broker. So I think in time, we will need to have a decentralized model where if you want to incentivize your health data, you can throw it into a pool, or if you have artwork, or if you made logos or whatever. Obviously, it's going to be difficult to reverse engineer this and to have people make real money out of this. But to me, when I try to see the big picture, obviously we'll need to have some sort of a universal income model, and to me the fair way of doing this would be to sort of we give our data and then we get something back in return, and based on where we live, maybe my data is more valuable than someone who lives in a lower, so I think in a decentralized way it will balance itself, or if you're more creative and you do more output, you'll sell more. So that's the only way to me this makes sense long term. Not a short-term patchwork, but to me, when I think about it, that's how I feel.
Yeah, my mind goes to an example, again, back to healthcare, to your point, Siemens. We all know those big MRI machines, right? They're loud, it takes forever to go through them, and they've done a software update, and now you can get an MRI scan at fraction of the time, and they made an incremental $1 billion just through that software release, right? I think so. There's no way stopping this massive explosion of AI, and I think the applications are just massive, and they're everywhere. I think that subject matter experts who use technology well will go further and faster. I think it might be same for creatives, right? Somebody who's extremely creative might go further faster with AI, in their hands. So that's the light I'm kind of trying to see this from. Somebody who really knows what they're doing, who are really good at what they're doing, armed with the capabilities that they didn't have before through AI, I think that's kind of gonna unleash a massive amount of opportunity. I don't think it's a zero-sum game where AI will replace those human capabilities. I think it's gonna exponentially grow what humanity, could do. So that's the light I'm trying to see that from.
I think it's a really important point because the creativity gets to the point of like human creation. So I love what you said about universal basic income. I do think that's something we have to consider. We do have more wealth disparity in this country than we've ever had in history, right? With more billionaires, like less distribution. I'm a Star Trek fan. I don't know if anybody here is a Star Trek fan, but you know, yeah, we now can talk to a computer in natural language and have them respond. So just like in Star Trek, they say computer and they respond. We have that. Part of Star Trek is there's universal basic income because they've decided that we want to focus on development. So I hope this is a path to that.
For countries who can afford it, it's a fabulous solution.
Agreed.
Well,
That's a
Star
very
Trek has a
important
replicator too, so.
Right. I opened up a can of worms by talking.
Yeah.
But
Conversation.
I think
Yeah.
it's so good. But
We don't want to talk
what
politics.
I think social media in a way hurt local news, but it has created this whole creator economy as well.
Yeah.
It's funny for me to say because my father had like 4 million social media followers. I don't like social media. I don't post, kind of unless I have to. But I think we're going to lead to an explosion on one sense, and that the models will get figured out. We see OpenAI signing publisher agreements now, which by the way is a huge opportunity on publisher agreements and data. And then I don't know if anybody else it bolsters human creativity to the point. I don't know. Has anybody else here? I wrote a friend a birthday card. I wanted to be creative, and I felt obligated to say, I didn't use ChatGPT to write this. I did this myself, and I don't know, has anybody else felt that way?
It's like a handmade card.
Yeah, it's a handmade card,
Yeah,
right?
I
So
like
in a way, it's gonna bolster genuine, with genuine creativity. So I think those types of things will happen.
All right, well, I want to thank our amazing panelists for their time and sharing their great perspectives.
Amazing moderator.
Yeah.
Thank you. So let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you, IPEC, for coordinating this and
Thank
for
you.
our distinguished panelists. Special 2 thanks goes out to Aylin Uysal, who's actually hosting us today. And Ike, who's actually the entire coordination of the legwork. So thank you. Please keep having a good time, have some drinks, and we'll mingle. So thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Let's